The second Bill Maher opened his mouth, you could feel the temperature in the room change, because this wasn't going to be polite, and it definitely wasn't going to be subtle. It was the kind of televised moment that slices through celebrity polish like a blade through silk, and when Meghan Markle's name hit the air, the audience already knew something explosive was coming. What followed wasn't just commentary. It was a roast so sharp, so unapologetic, that people were left clutching their sides while others stared in disbelief. And yes, the crowd reaction, completely unhinged.
To the world, it's just, what has she been doing? Does she work? As opposed to, oh my gosh, I work so hard, and I appreciate what hard work looks like. I like working hard.
The beginning of that clip where she's like, oh my God, it's like, it's so inauthentic.
It all started with that burning question that refuses to die. Is Meghan Markle misunderstood or masterfully manipulating the narrative? The Duchess of Sussex has spent years trying to rewrite her story, layering vulnerability over criticism, but Bill Maher didn't treat the subject with velvet gloves. He leaned in, hard, and when he referenced her latest emotional podcast appearance, the one where tears were supposedly flowing and authenticity was front and center, he didn't buy it, not for a second.
I don't know how much longer my father has. He won't speak to me because of this security stuff. I would love reconciliation with my family. I've always, there's no point in continuing to fight anymore. As I said, life is precious.
If you are trying to reconcile with your family, if you are trying to make amends, you don't go on TV and blame them again. This is literally the last thing.
The crowd reaction, immediate. There's something electric about a live audience sensing blood in the water, and Maher delivered the line with that signature smirk that says, we're all thinking it. The dynamic between Meghan and Jamie Kern-Lima on that podcast had already sparked whispers online. Too much praise, too little pushback. It felt less like journalism and more like a carefully choreographed admiration ceremony. Maher didn't have to spell it out. The implication was hanging thick in the studio air. Then came the Time 100 controversy. When Meghan landed on the influential women list, critics didn't whisper, they roared. And Maher, he took that roar and amplified it. He questioned what influence really means in the era of curated vulnerability in product launches.
Meghan Markle is now accused of breaking the agreement with the late Queen after podcast revelation, with the compliments of HRH, which is Her Royal Highness, the Duchess of Sussex.
That's when the conversation shifted from polite skepticism to open mockery. Behind the scenes, rumors about former staff re-emerged like ghosts that refused to stay buried. Allegations of chaos, claims of impossible standards, stories that clash violently with the serene, compassionate image she presents publicly. None of it confirmed, but in the court of public opinion, confirmation isn't always required. Maher pointed out the disconnect, and the laughter that followed wasn't kind.
I made homemade strawberry jam. It's kind of like a doctor when you keep referring to them as doctor, like, call me Susan. Like, I would never refer to myself as Her Royal Highness.
I think if somebody gives you a gift, you can say, so-and-so, my friend so-and-so gave me a present. Yeah. I don't feel like she needed to show.
And then came the royal thread, the one that always tightens around this story. The speculation that her connection to the royal family is hanging by a thread. The criticism about titles. The question of whether signing as Her Royal Highness is branding or delusion. Maher's tone sharpened here. Because when Prince Harry's BBC interview aired around the same time, complete with emotional appeals and security grievances, it didn't generate universal sympathy. It generated eye rolls.
She's stuck because she was an actress who became a real princess, who wants to be an actress again, but has to continue to pretend to be a real princess.
The audience lost it again, because timing matters. Harry's speaking about family tensions while Meghan launches lifestyle products and emotional podcast episodes. For critics, it feels like a synchronized narrative machine. Maher hinted at that rhythm: emotional revelation, public backlash, product rollout, repeat. And then came the part that stung the most, the tears. Or rather, the alleged absence of them, and she also was pretending like she's crying. We zoomed in just to see. There isn't a tear in sight. Dan, look at this. I invite the viewers to take a close-up look at this. Where's the tear? That clip ricocheted online within minutes. Slow motion replays, zoom ins, frame by frame analysis. The internet became a courtroom and every pixel was evidence. Critics accused her of theatrical vulnerability. Supporters fired back, calling the scrutiny cruel and obsessive. But Maher didn't soften. he doubled down. When Meghan shared the detail about writing nightly emails to her children, a sentimental ritual straight out of a parenting handbook, Maher's delivery made it sound less like maternal devotion and more like brand storytelling. Sweet? Sure. But suspiciously perfect? That's what the crowd reaction suggested. That feeding of others is my self-care. Oh my God, Glenn. The contrast between lofty sentiment and biting commentary created a surreal energy. It wasn't just comedy anymore. It was cultural dissection. Critics like Megyn Kelly didn't mince words, labeling her a malignant narcissist. Others argued that the emotional storytelling always circles back to her struggles, her ventures, her narrative control. Maher's roast tapped into that broader fatigue, the sense that every interview becomes a monologue about self. Then the Time 100 Summit appearance reignited the blaze. Even though she wasn't on the 2025 list, her presence alone sparked debate. Online comparisons flew. Performative authenticity versus genuine influence. Maher skewered the optics, suggesting that influence measured in jam jars and cupcake sprinkles doesn't quite carry the same weight as global policy or investigative journalism. Who does she think she is? Gayle King. The line landed like a punchline and a provocation all at once. Meanwhile, Harry's security battle added more gasoline. I don't know how much longer my father has. The vulnerability in his voice was real, but the backlash was ruthless. That's a lie. You can take them back whenever you want. The divide widened. Some saw a son pleading for protection. Others saw manipulation timed to tug heartstrings. Maher's commentary didn't choose a side, it magnified the contradiction. And just when it felt like the roast had reached peak intensity, the former staff stories resurfaced again. Claims of chaotic work environments, confusing direction, expectations that shifted like sand. Whether exaggerated or accurate, they painted a picture far removed from the compassionate humanitarian image. She won't even organize her own clothes. That quote exploded across social media. The subtext? Authenticity versus privilege. Maher's genius wasn't in inventing accusations. It was in lining them up and letting the audience connect the dots. Emotional podcast, product launch, royal grievance, media storm, repeat cycle. The Jamie Kern Lima angle added another layer. Here's a billionaire businesswoman, sharp, strategic, sounding to some viewers like a devoted fan rather than a critical interviewer. Why? Martin leaned into that confusion. Was the episode spontaneous or meticulously controlled branding? That's the question echoing across platforms. As the roast continued, one theme kept resurfacing: perception. Supporters argue Meghan is held to impossible standards, scrutinized more harshly because she dared to step outside royal expectations. Critics argue that every tear and confession fills time to soften headlines about business setbacks or strained family ties. Maher's live commentary became a cultural mirror, not because it solved the debate, but because it exposed how exhausted people are by the cycle. Time recognition, Netflix projects underperforming, Spotify deal ending, lifestyle rebrands launching at lightning speed, emotional interviews arriving just in time to redirect the narrative. The crowd reaction said it all. Some laughed, some gasped, some clapped. It wasn't unified, it was chaotic, just like the public conversation surrounding Meghan herself. Media analysts are now asking whether constant exposure creates fatigue. When vulnerability becomes a recurring episode instead of a rare moment, does it lose impact? Maher suggested that audiences are starting to question intention more than content. Industry insiders are reportedly watching closely. The next project has to prove substance over spectacle, because buzz alone doesn't build legacy. Supporters insist the scrutiny is misogynistic, that women in the spotlight are punished for ambition and self-promotion. Critics counter that the pattern feels too strategic to ignore. Emotional reveal followed by commercial pivot. It's a formula, and formulas eventually get predictable. Maher's roast didn't end with a verdict. It ended with a question hanging in the air: are we witnessing genuine vulnerability or the most polished personal branding campaign of the decade? The line between real and rehearsed has never been thinner. And as the applause faded and the clip replayed across every platform imaginable, one thing became clear. Whether you love her or roll your eyes at the mere mention of her name, Meghan Markle remains a lightning rod. Bill Maher didn't create that electricity, he just plugged into it live on air and let the sparks fly. The fallout didn't simmer down after the cameras cut, it detonated online within minutes. Clips from the broadcast flooded timelines, reaction videos multiplied like wildfire, and suddenly Eventually, Bill Maher's roast wasn't just a late-night segment. It became the headline. Commentators dissected every smirk, every punchline, every pause where the audience laughter rolled just a little too long. Because this wasn't casual teasing. It felt like a cultural verdict delivered under studio lights. And what made it sting even harder was how effortlessly it tapped into the frustration that's been building around Meghan Markle for years. The emotional podcast moment that was meant to humanize her had now been reframed as theatrical. The carefully highlighted detail that she hadn't seen the questions beforehand, instead of reassuring people, it deepened suspicion. Why emphasize it so much unless the authenticity needed reinforcement? That was the undercurrent Maher leaned into without ever saying it outright. He didn't accuse, he implied. An implication is often sharper than accusation. The nightly emails to her children became another talking point. On the surface, it's sweet, intimate, maternal. But critics online were already calling it too polished, too storybook, too perfect. Maher's delivery turned it into a symbol of the broader issue. When every personal detail sounds like it belongs in a lifestyle brand manifesto, people start wondering where the brand ends and the person begins. The audience reaction proved that doubt is louder than ever. And then the conversation widened. It wasn't just about one podcast or one emotional clip anymore. It was about the pattern, emotional vulnerability, public sympathy, brand pivot, business launch. Repeat, that rhythm has become impossible to ignore. Even supporters who defend her fiercely acknowledge the timing is uncanny. Critics argue it's strategic choreography designed to keep her perpetually in the spotlight. Maher amplified that suspicion by connecting dots that were already floating around social media threads. Prince Harry's BBC interview added gasoline to the fire. His comments about security and family tensions were meant to expose vulnerability, but instead they reignited the narrative of grievance. When he spoke about not being able to safely return to the UK, it triggered an avalanche of counter-arguments online. The perception that the couple keeps revisiting the same wounds publicly created fatigue. Maher didn't mock the security concerns directly, he mocked the repetition, the sense that every few months there's a new chapter in the same saga. Then came the Time 100 optics. Influence is a powerful word. But in a hyper-connected era where influence can mean anything from policy reform to selling jam that disappears in 30 minutes, the definition feels stretched. Critics online question whether selling out limited stock truly equals cultural impact. Maher leaned into that irony, contrasting legacy influence with viral hype. The audience laughter wasn't just about the joke, it was about recognition. Recognition of the disconnect many feel between headlines and substance. Behind the glamour, the whispers about former staff resurfaced once again. Reports of a chaotic work environment, shifting expectations, tension behind the scenes, none of it officially confirmed, yet persistent enough to shake perception. Maher's roast subtly reminded viewers that public image and private reality don't always align. The polished humanitarian exterior clashes sharply with rumors of turmoil. That contradiction fuels the controversy more than any single interview ever could. Jamie Kern Lima's role in the podcast episode also took a hit. Here's a woman who built a billion-dollar empire known for strategic brilliance, and yet the interview felt to many like unfiltered admiration rather than scrutiny. Online critics argued that the dynamic felt staged, overly enthusiastic, almost rehearsed. Maher's commentary amplified that confusion. Why would someone with such business acumen conduct an interview that sounded more like a tribute? The implication was clear. Perhaps the entire episode functioned more as brand rehabilitation than journalistic exploration. And that brings us to the core tension that refuses to dissolve. Supporters argue that Meghan Markle has been under relentless scrutiny since the moment she entered royal life. They point to racial bias, misogyny, unrealistic expectations, and a media machine that thrives on tearing down outspoken women. They believe her vulnerability is genuine, that her emotional revelations are attempts to reclaim agency in a narrative that was hijacked long ago. They see courage where critics see calculation, but critics see a different pattern. They see strategic timing. They see emotional storytelling coinciding with business ventures. They see rebranding attempts that move at breakneck speed, wellness products, lifestyle pivots, streaming deals, documentary arcs. To them, it feels reactive, as if every controversy triggers a new launch, every backlash sparks a new confessional. That perception is what Maher's roast crystallized. Media analysts are now openly questioning whether constant exposure is sustainable. In today's climate, visibility equals relevance. But overexposure breeds skepticism. When audiences feel they're being guided emotionally rather than informed transparently, trust erodes. And once trust fractures, every future tier is examined frame by frame. Every pause becomes suspect. Every heartfelt admission invites side-eye. There's also the broader cultural fatigue with celebrity vulnerability itself. The modern formula is familiar, reveal trauma, trend online, monetize the momentum. Meghan Markle happens to sit at the intersection of royalty and Hollywood, which magnifies every move tenfold. Maher's roast didn't invent that dynamic. It spotlighted it in prime time. Meanwhile, industry insiders reportedly whisper about the next project needing to prove substance over spectacle. Buzz no longer suffices. Streaming platforms want numbers. Brands want stability. Audiences want authenticity that doesn't feel like a prelude to a product drop. The stakes are higher now because the skepticism is louder. Yet even amid the criticism, Meghan remains undeniably magnetic. That's the paradox. The same people who claim exhaustion still click, still comment, still debate. Attention, even negative attention, sustains influence. Maher's roast only intensified the spotlight. It didn't diminish it. If anything, it reignited the discourse with sharper edges. The royal dimension complicates everything further. The strained relationship with King Charles. The security battle. The lingering perception of a family feud broadcast in installments. Each interview, each statement adds another layer to a saga that refuses to fade. Critics argue the grievances keep widening the divide. Supporters argue speaking out is the only way to defend their narrative. The truth likely lives somewhere murkier than either side admits. What Maher accomplished in that live moment was crystallization. He distilled years of swirling debate into a series of biting observations that landed because the audience was already primed. The laughter wasn't purely comedic, it was cathartic. A release of tension built from endless headlines and recycled controversies. The larger question now looms heavier than ever. Can Meghan and Harry pivot to a phase defined by consistent output rather than constant explanation? Because explanation, no matter how heartfelt, eventually sounds repetitive. And repetition, in the age of infinite scrolling, loses potency. Still, dismissing Meghan entirely would be naive. Reinvention is her hallmark. She has shifted identities before, actress to duchess, duchess to media entrepreneur. The next evolution may already be in motion behind the scenes. The challenge will be convincing a divided audience that the evolution is organic rather than orchestrated. Bill Maher's roast didn't end her narrative. It sharpened it. It forced the conversation into the open with uncomfortable clarity. It reminded viewers that celebrity storytelling is both performance and confession, both vulnerability and strategy, and it exposed how thin the line between those categories has become. As the viral clips continue circulating and debates rage in comment sections, one thing remains undeniable: Meghan Markle still commands attention like few others. Whether that attention transforms into renewed credibility or deepens the skepticism depends entirely on what happens next. Because in today's media ecosystem, the audience isn't just watching, it's analyzing, replaying, zooming in, and asking one relentless question: is this real or is this branding?